In the beginning, again, cultivate the right motivation for listening to the Dharma. I think that I'm going to listen to these teachings on the 37 Bodhisattva practices and thereafter engage in its practice in order to bring all sentient beings to the state of enlightenment. So I think that for this purpose, I will unite body, speech, and mind into one and listen to the Dharma teachings. And all other sentient beings wish to be happy, but they do not know that the cause of happiness are virtuous actions. And they do not want to suffer, but they do not abandon the causes of suffering. So cultivate a motivation of immeasurable compassion for them. And when you listen to the Dharma, listen free from the 3 faults and the 6 stains. So today we continue with verse number 16. It says, even if someone you have cared for as dearly as your own child regards you as an enemy, love that person even more as a mother would her ailing child. This is the way of a bodhisattva. And so in the commentary, it speaks about and 2 ways of a few ways of taking things as a path. So the first one is taking that which is difficult to bear as the path, and then secondly, taking a kind of a lack of gratitude as the path. And then thirdly, taking humiliation as the path. So when you treat others as lovingly as your own child, and then in return they treat you like an enemy, then it is very difficult to be patient, to practice patience with that. So there's the point on taking humiliation as the path. Of course, when someone that is higher than yourself humiliates you, then we have ways of taking that on as the path, of practicing with that. But then even if someone who's actually lower than you humiliates you, and there are instructions on how to practice with that. So, for example, if a mother has a child who develops some mental issues, and then always creates all kinds of trouble, all kinds of difficulties for the mother, and the mother wouldn't think that, oh, my child is so bad. And I better get rid of him. So my mother wouldn't think that way. When her child acts in such a way, she would have even more compassion for the child and wish for him to get better, to become free from this sickness, and love the child even more, and care for the child even more. And so, in a similar way, the Bodhisattvas, when in response to harm, unjustified harm that they receive, they will only respond with great love. And then there's a quote by a very famous Samkadampa Geshe Langri Tangpa, and he said, when someone whom you have helped with kindness, and in whom you have put all your hopes, if such a person treats you with contempt and does not repay this kindness, you should regard this person as a holy spiritual friend and not get angry with them. And so then it says in a commentary which is quite similar to the previous master's words, and that is, so if someone does not repay your kindness and acts in very corrupt ways and like accumulates negative karma, and so then we should think that with pity of them, with compassion, that this poor being accumulates such evil karma, and as a result of that, they will experience a lot of suffering. So they would actually recognize such a person as an object of great love, and then therefore regard them with great love.
Okay, I think mama do yin just saying dark and dark solar, dark and dark solar, no sita. In the draw yon, no sip. Maron Joe and Tonto Tinjana, like when he genius keep us on the young man like an Hakondo.
And then the Bodhisattva Mulcho Tome, he also says that if someone comes to harm you, and even someone who brings harm to the teachings and to sentient beings, so when you hear of see such a person or think of such a person, you should develop even greater compassion for them. And so then, as it says that if a person in whom you have placed all your hopes, all your trust, then and deceives you, or if someone that you have helped greatly in return harms you, then if you're unable to cultivate love for such a person, it is a sign of you not being able to cultivate bodhicitta. And so then one must make an even greater effort to cultivate bodhicitta for them, just like the Bodhisattva Ngulje Thome had cultivated. So now I've been mentioning all these spiritual masters, these Kadampa Geshes and so on, many different lists of names. And maybe when you hear this name and that name, no special feeling arises. A special feeling may not arise in you. Just hearing what this person and that person said, but as I mentioned yesterday, the Bodhisattva Ngulje Thome, for instance, had the perfect qualities of learning and the qualities of meditation, and also bodhicitta had arisen in his mind, and he also saw the deity directly. So these are all masters who have gained an actual experience in the practice and have developed a fruition, and the fruition has come from this practice. So we need to know that these are not just people who know how to speak nicely, but actually whatever they say comes from their direct experience. Then verse number 17 says, even if an equal or lesser person humiliates you out of pride, respectfully place them like a guru on the crown of your head. This is the way of a bodhisattva. So for the meaning of this verse, it says in the commentary, and a person that has either an equal or a lower status than yourself in terms of maybe their social status or their body, their physique, their wealth or their learning and so on, their qualities. And such a person out of pride treats you with contempt or insults you with disrespect, then a bodhisattva would not only not get angry and resentful at them, but instead they would regard them with great respect as a kind guru and place them at the crown of their heads. So this is how the bodhisattvas would take the humiliation or contempt as the path. And so then it says, when someone, whether they are of higher or of lower status, harms you, one should regard that person with great respect, seeing them as a Buddha. Now, even if someone who is of an inferior status causes harm or it humiliates you, treats you with contempt. If one were to respond to that harm with harm, then the anger in the other person would increase even more, would grow even stronger. And on top of that, one's own virtuous conduct would decline. And in this way, both you and the other person would gain a fault. Therefore, if one does not respond in a similar harmful way, but rather sees them as an object of patience, then one will remain unflawed, flawless. And so in particular, when it comes to someone who is of a lower status, like a harm doer of a lower status, one must develop a sense of patience for them. And this kind of patience is, it says here again, like a magnificent, a great patience. And it is really magnificent. It is really amazing if one can practice in this way, because if somebody is higher than you, somebody higher than you humiliates you, then to practice and patience for them is one thing. But if you're even able to practice patience with someone who is actually of lower status than you, that's even more incredible, because normally when somebody who is lower than me humiliates me, looks down on me, then we get even more angry. But if on the other hand we are able to practice in this way here, that is even more incredible, more amazing than even seeing a deity directly. And then there is a quote by Nagarjuna. Nagarjuna says that the cause of enlightenment, and also all dharmas that are conducive to enlightenment, all comes from other sentient beings, comes through other sentient beings. And for this reason, somebody who wishes to attain complete enlightenment should regard other sentient beings as a guru. And then there's a quote by Geshe Langri Thangpa, and this was taken from a prayer on the Lojong, under the mind training. And so Geshe Langri Thangpa says that to me, all sentient beings are even greater than a wish-fulfilling jewel. And so even if someone were to come and harm me, would still sustain the intention to accomplish the greatest good and cherish them with great care. And then there's a quote by Ngulcho Tongme, the Bodhisattva, and he says that even if I have not done the slightest thing wrong, if someone of higher or equal status will come and harm me in whichever way, large or small, at this time I must remember my commitment. And then the third point is to take rise and fall, prosperity and decline as the path. And that is verse number 18. It says, though you may be impoverished, always disparaged, gripped by disease, and tormented by spirits, never lose courage, but take upon yourself the misdeeds and pains of all beings. This is the way of a bodhisattva. So normally when things go well and we are all happy, then we tend to get prideful and then look down on others. But then once we encounter difficulties, then we lose all our courage, and we think that no one in this world is worse off than I am, or for example when we get sick and so on. And so no matter what arises, whether we experience a rise or fall, one must not become overwhelmed by that and continue to engage in practice. And so then in the commentary, it says for the the meaning of this verse, that when one finds oneself in times of lacking wealth and possessions, or one has had wealth and possessions and one has lost them to enemies and so forth, or one finds oneself in times where one is impoverished and deprived of food and clothing, life sustenance, and on top of that, if others then humiliate one and belittle one, look down on one, and then on top of that, one may fall ill and contract a very serious disease like leprosy and so on. And on top of that, one may experience harm by evil spirits and such beings. So whatever of such suffering one encounters, one should take one's own suffering kind of as an example, and through inference, knowing that through one's own suffering, one can infer or kind of feel the suffering of others, understand the suffering of other beings. And in this way, one becomes able to practice patience and forbearance with one's own suffering. And instead of thinking about one's own suffering, one thinks about the suffering of others, and with great compassion for others, one takes all of their negativities and all of their suffering upon oneself. So this is how in times of impoverishment, the bodhisattvas practice without becoming intimidated, without losing their courage or inner strength. They take upon all the suffering and the misdeeds of other sentient beings. And it is said in the Bodhicharyavatara that without suffering, there will also be no renunciation to samsara. And so if there's no, and then the quote ends, and then so if there's no renunciation to samsara, then also we will not engage in Dharma practice. So therefore, we need to recognize or identify suffering as actually something positive. And with that, one is able to take on the suffering of others upon oneself and give away one's own happiness to others. One exchanges self with others, putting others before oneself. So one engages in the practice of dongren, of giving away one's own happiness and taking on the suffering of others. So this is how one should reflect. For example, if a person loses one of his legs, or kind of has injures his leg, and then he feels that if they can, on the one hand, they can suffer about it and think that, oh, now I don't have my leg. But even if we are miserable about missing a leg, the leg will not grow again. But on the other hand, one could think that even though I'm missing one leg, I still have another leg. And there's so many people who don't have both legs. So I'm actually still better off. So one can also think in this way. And then Geshe Karapa said that so even if one now, even the slightest suffering that one experiences now is the result of negative deeds accumulated in the past. And with this suffering, this negative karma is coming to an end. So, for example, it is, and that's not in the quote, but for example, it is said that if one has the karma to be born in hell, then even a headache can purify this karma. Therefore, the suffering of having a headache purifies such negative karma. So one should think that suffering purifies negativities and negative karma. So therefore, coming back to that quote, one should regard suffering with great joy, and thinking that for the future, for future lives, since suffering has become cleared away, I will proceed to happiness. And then it says here in the same quote, negative conditions are a spiritual teacher. Obstacles are an encouragement to practice virtue, and suffering is like the debts that we pay back, our karmic debt that is being repaid, and therefore one should not regard suffering as a negative thing. So therefore one shouldn't see suffering as a negative thing. And so then if suffering can actually appear, one can see suffering as happiness, as a positive thing, then actually no negative condition and no obstacle and nothing whatsoever can affect you in any way. And one is able to overcome any kind of hindrance, just like these previous masters have overcome.
Okay, karta jan sek sawa te ta chodu kana donghar kin je gebjer je thosan ro the chupa zam de nam tar yin song do.
So just to summarize these words into their essence, so then Nututome says that through the condition of experiencing suffering, suffering becomes like a conducive companion, a friend in your practice of virtue. And so therefore it is suffering then becomes like the life story of a good Dharma practitioner. For example, in America, a lot of people often say that I practiced the Dharma, but then this happened or that happened, or I made a prayer, but it did not get accomplished. But if we think in this way, then we regard the Dharma more as like doing business. So we do one thing and then we need to get something in return. And that is a sign that we don't really understand the Dharma. And so we should understand that we should not approach the Dharma in this way.
Okay, tene da himpa try can roman ki tu libatela. Now to pay a non dot of your civil pamber will miss and come by me, but just say means.
And verse number 19 says, though you may be famous and revered by many and are as rich as the wealth God himself, having seen that worldly fortune is without essence, do not be proud. This is the way of a bodhisattva. So then it says, for the meaning of this verse, so if on the other hand one experiences a perfect social status, a perfect body, a perfect wealth and possessions, and one becomes venerated and respected by many other people, and many other people even bow their heads down to one. Even if one becomes as rich as the wealth god Vajravana himself, one should understand that all such worldly possessions and perfections are changeable, are kind of moving constantly, just like lightning flash in the sky, or they are unstable, just like a dewdrop on a tip of a blade of grass, or they have no essence, just like a water bubble, or they are something that we leave behind, just like a snake leaves behind its skin. Therefore, it is the Bodhisattva's practice not to become arrogant and prideful in the face of a perfect wealth and perfection. Sasagya Pandita Ahmed said that when one is prideful, one becomes like kind of like a closed off rock, and no matter how much water you pour on it, no water can be retained. It will just be kind of shrugged off. It will just rinse off the rock, but will not be absorbed into it. And so similarly, when somebody is very prideful, then qualities cannot arise within one. So in a Dharma sense now too, if we think that I'm better than him and I have more learning than more qualities than he does, then one will not pay much interest to what others have to say, and then qualities will not arise within one's mind. So then in the Bodhicharyavatara, it says, if one becomes inflated by pride, by the affliction of pride, then this pride will lead one to the lower realms. And so that's the end of the quote. And then it says in the commentary, so if one experiences like a freedom of illness, and if all wealth and possessions are assembled, and one enjoys perfect social status, a body, scholarship, and various qualities. So one experiences vast well-being with body and with mind. If one becomes puffed up with pride, then one will humiliate others, one will look down on others and engage in all sorts of non-dharmic activities, and then becoming controlled by such desires. And one will lose mindfulness in this lifetime, and therefore engage in many mistakes, and suffering will arise as a result. Then, as a result, in future lifetimes, one will take birth in the lower realms, in an inferior like social class, or as an inferior being. Then it says in the precious garland, even if one's possessions and perfections equal that of the gods, do not become prideful. So that's the end of the quote. And so one should not become prideful, because pride, all these possessions and perfections are changeable by nature. They are not stable or lasting. And then it says next, number 4, is to take attachment and aversion as the path. And so for this one first takes the object of aversion as the path, and that is verse number 20. It says, if the enemy, your own anger, is not tamed, subduing outer enemies will only make them increase. Therefore, subdue your own mind with the army of love and compassion. This is the way of a bodhisattva. And so for the meaning of this verse, it says, so amongst the many enemies, amongst all the enemies, the enemy that needs to be tamed is the enemy that is extremely difficult to tame, and that is the afflictive emotion of one's own hatred. If one does not tame and kill this enemy of one's own hatred, and instead tries to tame and eliminate outer enemies, they will only increase. On the other hand, if one eliminates the enemy of one's own hatred, then also all the outer enemies will naturally become pacified. And so for this reason, a bodhisattva reflects that all enemies and may all enemies and friends experience happiness. So a bodhisattva regards also one's enemies with great loving kindness. And so therefore a bodhisattva arouses the army of love and compassion that wishes to separate those enemies from their suffering. And so in this way, the bodhisattvas tame the enemy of the afflictive emotions within their own mind streams. Also in the Bodhicharyavatara, it says that instead of covering the entire earth with leather, one can wear leather shoes. So, for example, if that is like a mind of patience, someone who is wearing leather shoes instead of expecting the whole world to become filled with leather. So, if a person says, like, I want everything to be filled with leather so I can walk smoothly, they will never find that much leather in the world to cover the whole surface of the earth. But what they can do is just put some leather shoes on their feet, and then wherever they walk, they are walking on leather. It's the same. So with patience, if we tame the enemy of our own hatred, then just naturally all the outer enemies will become tamed or pacified. So the practice of patience is most important. Lord Jiten Sumgyan also said the most supreme protection sphere is bodhicitta. So the best protection is bodhicitta. And that is really true. If you don't harm others, then it's also hard for them to harm you. On the other hand, if you have no bodhicitta, just visualize a deity and so on, and then if you harm somebody, they will immediately harm you back in return. So what the Buddha said is really true. In Milarepa's life story, there's a story of when Milarepa, one time he left his cave, he went outside, and so then in the meantime, the local some gods, some spirits performed some miracles. So when Milarepa returned to the cave, he saw these spirits. They were called the Atsaras. He saw these Atsaras with like bulging eyes and small bodies in his cave, and some of them were cooking food in the clay pot, and others were making a fire, and then some others were sitting together laughing. And first Milarepa tried to get rid of them by visualizing the deity, but they didn't go. And then he tried to recite mantra, but they still didn't go. But then he cultivated bodhicitta and the view of emptiness, and that actually made them disappear. So then in the Prajnaparamita in 100,000 verses, it says, so regardless of the harm and destruction one encounters, this one. And these, regardless of the harm and the destruction caused by enemies that one encounters, if one destroys one's own hatred for these enemies, then all enemies have been destroyed. So then another Kadamba master has said that if you tame your inner mind, then no outer enemy can cause you any harm. So then the Bodhisattva Mulchotomim brings this verse to its essence. In summary, he says that abandon hatred towards enemies. If you are unable to tame your own hatred, then you will never rid yourself of outer enemies. And so therefore that's the end of the quote. And so it is therefore important in essence to, instead of taming one's outer enemies, to tame the inner enemy of one's own afflictive emotions. And so then in the commentary it says, for the meaning of this verse, so if one, at the times when one experiences, when one gains all like objects of desire, such as form, taste, touch, smell, sounds, and so forth, pleasant sense objects, or taste, sweet and pleasant taste, and gentle, soft objects to touch. If one gains enjoyments, and just like the powerful gods themselves, one should regard them as like drinking salt water. But the more one drinks, the more water one wants. And as a result, suffering will only increase. So a bodhisattva recognizes that this is worldly. These are all worldly attachments, and in future lives, they are the very source of all shortcomings and much suffering. And so, for this reason, they give up attachment to any object of enjoyment in general, and in particular, that in the various necessities that necessary objects, large and small, that surround one immediately. So bodhisattvas give up clinging attachment to such sense pleasures. So when we become attached to the various sense pleasures, it always ends in suffering. So, for example, we become addicted to smoking or drinking alcohol, or we just indulge in all kinds of sense pleasures like forms and sounds and smells, touch, taste, and so forth. And then when we indulge in these, which is an insatiable thirst, then as a result, we always encounter troubles and a lot of suffering. Yeah, for example, if somebody is drinking alcohol, so it begins with just drinking a little bit at first, and then next time a little more, then a little more, and then they just keep drinking more and more until they form an addiction, like a habitual tendency. And then eventually they can't be without the alcohol. And if they are without alcohol, then their whole body shakes and they get all dizzy. And the doctors even tell them it would be better for you if you stop drinking. If you keep drinking, then you will die. But then often they don't trust the doctor, and they even say that the doctor is crazy. They don't know what they're talking about. Until now, I drank alcohol and I'm still alive. I didn't die. Actually, in my homeland, some people do actually say that. And this is what happens when you become addicted to something. Then you cannot be without it. And so the same applies to any of the sense pleasures. We need to have contentment, and that it goes for any smoking or drinking, for whatever it is, whatever we enjoy of food. We need to practice contentment, because if we do not practice this restraint, then we will always encounter difficulties and suffering. It says in a sutra called the Sutra of the Vast Display, the Lalita Vistara, it says that so as a result of desire for sense pleasures, we encounter many difficulties, much suffering. If the afflictive emotions lead to enemies, so they are the source of enemies arising. And they are as dangerous as a poisonous tree or a sharp sword. And therefore, the bodhisattvas abandon the five sense pleasures, just like a dirty vessel that is thrown into the garbage. So they do not indulge in the sense pleasures. And then in the Bodhicharya Avatara, it says, in this world and beyond this world, desires are like the source of all destruction. For example, the end quote. So, for example, if like a leader of a country and enjoys, like takes all the wealth of the country, and that they're not taking a little bit, they're taking tens and thousands and hundreds and thousands of dollars, and then in the end, it will actually lead to their ruin, because their attachment to that is insatiable. So we can see a lot of examples of that in the world. So really all of our difficulties come from this lack of contentment. And then there is another quote from the letter to a friend by Nagarjuna. And it says that the greatest wealth of all is to possess the wealth of contentment. And the one who taught that was the Buddha. In one story of the Buddha, when the Buddha was alive, so the Buddha had a jewel that someone gave to him, and he gave the jewel. So that these disciples were wondering who he will give the jewel to, and he gave the jewel to an Indian king. And so then some of the disciples had some thoughts about that. Like why did he? Maybe he recognized the king as like someone more precious and so on. So he gave him the jewel, and so then they were wondering why he gave it to the king. And then the Buddha then said that the king's mind, the mind of the king is not like our mind. He still experiences a lot of suffering, a suffering of discontentment. Not only does he crave for his own land, but he even goes after other lands. He's insatiable. On the other hand, we just have the food that we beg for day by day. We possess contentment. So actually, we are the actual king. Those who live in such a way are the actual king, because the one who possesses contentment is the actual king. And so that's why the Buddha gave the jewel to the king, because he saw him as more impoverished. We have this saying that says, if you have no contentment, then even a king is a beggar. But if you have contentment, then even a beggar is a king. So anyways, now we take a break at this point.
Okay, thank you. Thanks so much. Then 11 o'clock, we start, right? Thank you.
Thank you. If one becomes attached to wealth, possessions, retinues, and relations, so friends, one is like an elephant drowning in a swamp. On the other hand, if one practices contentment, regardless of what arises, then our body and mind, or the activities of body, the bliss and happiness of body and mind will increase, and the activities of listening, pondering, and meditation will increase. And there is no greater suffering than the suffering of accumulating and protecting. And if one possesses contentment, even if one is poor, one is actually wealthy. So if we really think about it, we can understand that easily. Like if you have no contentment, we need more and more things, and if we need more things, we also need more time to spend on these things, and then that brings us a lot of difficulty, a lot of worries in the mind. Now, if we have no contentment, then we basically spend all of our time getting all these many things that we think we need. And then that robs us of the opportunity to practice the Dharma. On the other hand, if we possess contentment, and our activities will be fewer, we will have less worries in the mind, we have more time, and we have more time to opportunities to practice the Dharma. So contentment is really important. And so So it is in our mind. The thoughts and wishes arising in our mind are really endless. So therefore, we have to practice contentment. And so if we have a need for a lot of different kinds of food and clothing and all kinds of objects, then also that requires a greater expense. And if we have more expenses, then we have to work harder, and then we can't practice the Dharma. So since we have to practice the Dharma, it's important to practice contentment. And then next is verse number 22. Things as they appear are your own mind. Mind itself primordially transcends elaborated extremes. Knowing just this, do not create concepts of perceiver and perceived. This is the way of a bodhisattva. I'm not very good at teaching the Dharma, and so most disciples of the disciples are used to having heard many teachings of Mahamudra and Dzogchen, many other higher and really fancy teachings from really high lamas and great scholars. So I'm not able to go into that much detail, but I will share with you, or to the best of my abilities, whatever I know, just based on the root verse here. And for the meaning of the root verse, it says in the commentary, as the outer universe and the inner sentient beings, all apparent phenomena, are only imputations of the mind, are only the appearances of one's own mind. And from their own side, they possess no inherent existence. They're empty of self-nature. And the imputing mind, or the mind that perceives all of these apparent phenomena, that mind itself is primordially free from the extremes of existence and non-existence, eternalism or nihilism, free from all elaborated extremes. So if one understands the nature of phenomena, the fundamental nature of phenomena, ultimately in such a way, then the mind will become freed from the dualistic perception of an outer grasp at object, and an inner grasping mind, and the perception of their true existence. So it is a bodhisattva's practice, therefore, to habituate a state of emptiness wherein all perceived objects and the inner perceiving mind are free from the dualistic elaboration of subject and object. In the way. And so then it says it is the bodhisattva's practice to sustain a state of meditative equipoise, to sustain a meditative equipoise of mind being empty like space. So all appearances in this world are actually the appearances of one's own mind. And then if one looks at that mind itself, the mind itself is free from the extremes of existence or non-existence. Mind itself is like uncompounded space, free from a subject-object duality. And so now saying that all appearances are one's own mind, so we say everything is mind, and then the mind itself is emptiness, so everything is empty of self-nature. And so if we just leave it with this kind of conceptual understanding, and then we just, for example, walk in the middle of a road, and that would be quite dangerous. So that's not something that we should do. But this verse shows us how the Bodhisattvas practice and how they have realized ultimate reality. And until we have ourselves realized that, we still have to engage in practice. And Guru Rinpoche had said, while the view should be high as the sky, the conduct, the actions should be as fine as flour. And that means that it is necessary that even though our view is high, that we must follow karma, the workings of karma, the law of karma, cause and effect precisely. And so then again, back to the commentary, it says that all external phenomena are merely perceptions of the mind and do not exist inherently. And then that mind, that this perceiving mind itself, is free from arising, cessation, and abiding. And all phenomena appearing as a subject-object duality actually abide within unelaborated emptiness. And a yogin, when a yogin engages in practice, this is the point that a yogin engaging in practice needs to gain conviction, it needs to resolve. And so that is that the grasp at the perceived objects do not substantially exist from their own side. And even the grasping or perceiving mind itself does not exist inherently. It neither exists nor does it not exist. It is nothing that one can grasp. It is nothing that one can conceptually conceive of. It is nothing that the mind can engage in any way. And to realize it, the yogin must rest without distraction in a state of meditative equipoise, sustaining a state of empty space. And so we have to reflect on the whether or not outer objects are actually empty. So how can we reflect on that? So normally there's many things that we perceive on the outer level. So there's my body, there is somebody else's body, and there is a house, and so there's many things that we perceive. And so what we perceive is a coming together of many different things. And that is what we call a compounded phenomenon. For example, a house consists of many different parts, or they also say the body is an aggregate. So it is an aggregation of many different parts. And then when you look at each of these parts, then that is a way of really finding the emptiness, so concluding that these are really empty of any self nature. And then when you look at the inner mind, the mind also does not actually exist. It neither exists nor does it not exist. It is free from both these extremes of existence or non-existence, or we say it's free from the four extremes. It is profound, and it is vast and free from all mental elaboration. So when it comes to really understanding the mind, we have to meditate and to gain a direct experience. So there's actually no need to look at the outer objects and then keep thinking that this is empty or this is not empty, and that doesn't exist and that does exist, and so on. All we need to do is just look at the mind itself, and we can come to a conclusion through a real direct experience, where you experience that the mind is truly empty. So by looking at the mind in this way, you can gain such a certainty. In the 7 verses of supplication to Tara for protection, it says that it is due to the imprint, the habitual tendency of dualistic grasping. No matter what they do, they are bound. No, they're bound no matter what they do. The authentic Mother Goddess, please protect them. So it is because of dualistic grasping that we are confused, and it is confusion that it needs to be abandoned. And so it is abandoned when we rest within an empty state of non-duality. Then in the text, it says that Sharaba said that all things are do not inherently exist, just like empty space. All phenomena are free from all conceptual elaboration. And so gaining certainty in that, and within such a state of uncertainty, there is no concept whatsoever. There is no grasping whatsoever. And all conceptual thoughts and all mental engagement is absent. And one must abide single-pointedly in such a state of emptiness. And then in conclusion of this verse, then again, the Bodhisattva Ngurjutome says that because then the fundamental nature of everything that can be known, of all knowable things, transcends the intellect. So the fundamental nature of everything transcends the intellect. Concepts such as existence and not being and not being, existence and non-existence are abandoned. And having abandoned such concepts, one abides single-pointedly within an unelaborated state. And that's abiding single-pointedly in an unelaborated state is the meditative equipoise of the ultimate bodhicitta. So we need to meditate, and after meditation, we again have to engage in our normal conduct, the various activities. And so that is verse number 23. When you come across things that attract you, like beautiful rainbows in summertime, do not regard them as real and abandon clinging attachment. This is the way of a bodhisattva. Then for the meaning of this verse, it says in the commentary, so when you encounter pleasing sense objects, loving friends and dear ones, beautiful forms, sounds, and so forth, happiness, well-being, even though they may appear as beautiful as a rainbow in summertime, they do not exist the way they appear. Even though they appear in many beautiful ways, a bodhisattva does not grasp at their true existence and views them as something that doesn't truly exist. So therefore, a bodhisattva reflects that whatever pleasing thing appears, like family and friends and beautiful sense objects, whatever appears, a bodhisattva abandons clinging attachment by not clinging to the true existence of these appearances. And so that is called the practice of abandoning clinging attachment to pleasing sense objects. So no, we do some like temporarily we do some meditation, and then we think that no, it's going well. But then when we again engage in normal activities in our day-to-day life, then again we are attached to pleasant sounds, so like the pleasant words, and we have an aversion against unpleasant words, or we are attached to beautiful sights, and we have an aversion against unpleasant sights. Or when it comes to food, we have an attachment to good food and an aversion against bad food, and so on. So we are controlled by these thoughts of attachment and aversion. And due to that, we accumulate karma. And that will lead to the experience of suffering. And so, therefore, we need to abandon that clinging attachment and aversion and perceive all appearances like a rainbow in summertime. A rainbow appears very clear in color, but still we can't actually grasp it. We can't hold the rainbow. So thinking in this way, we have to abandon clinging attachment. Gajrama Moshe always tells his disciples that you should not take the tongue as more important, but your physical health. So if it's good for your body, then you should eat it, even if it doesn't taste so good. And then verse number 24 says, all suffering is like the death of your child in a dream. How exhausting it is to hold deluded appearances as real. Therefore, when encountering difficult circumstances, see them as delusions. This is the way of a bodhisattva. So when you encounter undesired objects like enemies, evil spirits, and so forth, unpleasant forms, unpleasant sounds, and so forth, suffering, various kinds of suffering, and undesirable, various undesirable objects, whatever appears should be regarded as like one's own child dying in a dream. So one should regard it as illusory by nature. Because if one grasps at the true existence of such confused perceptions of suffering and so forth as real, then grasping will solidify, and you will tire yourself out. You become weary, and becoming weary and disheartened, tired and disheartened. Everything transforms into suffering. Everything becomes suffering, and so for this reason, when encountering unpleasant circumstances of any sort, such as enemies and anything else undesirable, a bodhisattva does not cling to the true existence, but regards them as illusory, delusory appearances that do not actually inherently exist. And so, for example, if a girl has a dream of having a child, and so first when she has the child, she's so happy about it, but then in the dream the child dies, then she's overwhelmed by grief and suffering. And so this is how it is when we are attached to the true existence of appearing things in this world. Then they become all a cause of suffering, which is just like one's child dying in a dream. So if one can see all suffering that arises just as illusory as a child dying in a dream, then all of these problems and sufferings, difficulties will not really affect one or harm one so greatly, and one will be able to practice the Dharma. And then again, Karapa said, all phenomena are as illusory as a dream. There is nothing whatsoever that possesses any true existence, any true reality. And even though things do not truly exist, they still appear. Therefore, since they do not truly exist, do not cling to their true existence. And then the quote continues. It says, even though things do not inherently exist, they are their existence is dreamlike, and therefore it is the workings of karma, cause and effect, is just like the delusion that we experience in the dream. And still, if karma is committed, the result is unfailing. And we also say that after we have died, we go on just like in a dream after death. And so that's because it's just like a dream. We don't really need to be afraid of it so much. But even though it's like a dream, when we're actually dreaming, then while we are in the dream, we experience the dream as a reality. So we feel all kinds of sensations. We feel pain, we feel suffering and fear in our dreams. And while we suffer in our dreams, at that time, we don't think, oh, it's just a dream. We are actually experiencing it. Just like the same feelings that we experience now when we are not dreaming. And the other night, I had a dream where I dreamt that something hit my head. And then when I woke up, I actually had red eyes. And so during that time when I was dreaming and sleeping, and there was this actual feeling of fear, like something had hit me. And of course, when you're really dreaming, nobody knows that we're actually dreaming now. We don't know that we're dreaming. And until we wake up from the dream and we experience whatever feeling arises in the dream, whether it's suffering or happiness. For example, we have a nightmare of being burned by fire, or we're drowning in water, and we're going through this whole exact experience, this frightening experience, and it will last until we wake up. And there is no other method to clear it away than waking up. And so there's no point in talking to that sleeping person, saying that it's just a nightmare, it's just an illusion, it's not real, you're actually sleeping in your bed. And until they wake up, they will still continue to experience this confusion, and they will not recognize the confusion, and will continue to experience suffering. And then it says in the text that there are 5 trainings to train in. And there, one needs to train in 5 trainings. One needs to train in the 6 paramitas, and one needs to train in the 4 dharmas as taught in the sutras, and one needs to train in the way of abandoning the afflictive emotions, and one needs to train in accomplishing the benefit of others with mindful awareness, and one needs to train in dedicating one's virtues for complete enlightenment. So one must train in the 6 paramitas. So the first paramita is the paramita of generosity, and that's the next verse, number 25. When even one's body must be given up when aspiring for enlightenment, what need is there to mention material things? Therefore, practice generosity without hope for rewards or karmic results. This is the way of a bodhisattva. And then in the commentary, it explains the meaning of this verse. So it says, since bodhisattvas aspire, since we aspire to the since we aspire to the state of perfect and complete enlightenment, just as it is taught in the life stories of the Buddha, where the Buddha had given up even his own body, his head and limbs for the sake of others, in countless of his lifetimes. Similarly, there is no need to mention that we need to give up various outer possessions, enjoyments, even our spouses and children, and so forth, if needed, to others. So, in this way, the Bodhisattvas engage in the practice of generosity. And at that time, when practicing generosity, they have no hope for any wealth or other things in return. They have no hopes for any karmic results in the future, any reciprocation in the future as a result of, in response to their acts of generosity. But without any hopes of reciprocation, they engage in the three kinds of generosity. Completely wishing to give away all roots of virtue together with their results, not claiming anything to be their own, and giving all away to others. So this is the way in which Bodhisattvas practice in the perfection of generosity. And then, so there are three kinds of generosity. And in a commentary, it explains these three kinds. So it says, the first on the outer level, the first kind of generosity is to offer to give material things of any kind, inner and outer. Then the second kind of generosity is to grant protection to sentient beings from the fear of other humans or non-humans or the elements and so forth. And then the third kind is to show the holy Dharma without misleading others, and then to show the workings of karma completely and without misleading to others. So this is called the generosity of giving the Dharma. And the Buddha himself had practiced generosity for many aeons, and he finally perfected generosity. And so in these lifetimes, it's not that he was always really wealthy and rich, so he could make many offerings. There are many times he was poor, like a beggar, but he still perfected generosity. And that's because of his mind that wishes to give away. As he had a state of mind that can give away anything. You're able to give away anything, whatever it is, for the sake of sentient beings. And so this is how he perfected generosity. So the Buddha also, when he was practicing the perfection of generosity and encountering other people, it's not that everyone that he encountered just became rich through encountering him. And there are many people who encountered him who were poor, who remained poor. But he was able to, it's his mind, his wish to give away. He was able to give away even parts of his body, like his head and his limbs and so forth. So it's through the wish to give away, that's how he perfected generosity. Milarepa said that apart from giving up self-grasping, there is no other perfection of generosity than that. So if one has no self-grasping, then there is also no separate need to practice generosity. Because generosity is the antidote to self-grasping. But we always think that we want, for example, a beautiful, something that looks beautiful, or we want something that tastes good, or something that sounds good, and so on. We always think, I want this and want that. And that's our self-grasping. And of course, if you have no self-grasping, then there's also no need to practice generosity. But if we have self-grasping, then we do have to practice generosity. And then, so in conclusion of this verse, then the Bodhisattva Mudrutome says that to give without any hope of any return in this life or any future fruition is praised by the Buddha. And then it says, so when seeing and it is and a bodhisattva, for example, feels some joy when seeing a needy person like a beggar, because then they have an opportunity to practice generosity and give to them. And then so with great joy and smiles, they readily give away even their own body, their own life force, their flesh and blood, without wishing for anything in return. So then we stop here and we do the Jigten Sumgun dedication.
Yes.
Page 18. Glorious, holy, venerable, precious, kind fruit and lineage gurus, divine assembly of yidams, of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, heroes and heroines, yogini and her assembly of dakinis, all of you dwelling in the 10 directions, please heed me. By the power of this vast root of virtue, may I benefit all beings through my body, speech, and mind. May the afflictions of hatred, attachment, hatred, ignorance, pride, and jealousy not arise in my mind. May thoughts of fame, reputation, gain, respect, honor, and concern for this life not arise for even a moment. May my mind stream be moistened by loving kindness, compassion, and bodhicitta. May I become a spiritual master with good qualities equal to the infinity of space. May I gain the supreme attainment of Mahamudra in this very life. At the moment of death, may I not experience the suffering of being abruptly severed from this life. May I not suffer a terrible death. May I not die confused by wrong view. May I not experience an untimely death. May I die joyfully and happily in the great luminosity of the mind itself and in the crystal clarity of Dharmata. May I, in any case, gain the supreme attainment of Mahamudra at the time of death, or in the bardo.
In the Buddha, Dharma, and the Sangha most excellent, I take refuge until enlightenment is reached. By the merit of generosity and the other perfections, may I attain Buddhahood for the benefit of all beings. So of the 6 perfections, the 6 paramitas, the first one is the paramita of generosity. And we have said that mainly generosity is a wish to give to others. And we also said that even though we are not able to make everyone rich by being generous to them, we should have this mindset that when the opportunity comes up, then I'm going to be generous. I'm going to help others. So it's good to have this wish to give to others. So even if one doesn't have a lot of wealth and money and so on to give to people, we should have a good intention. And even if we recite a single mani mantra, or we do one good thing, or we help others a little bit, then if we dedicate that for the sake of all sentient beings, it becomes the perfection of generosity. So we don't necessarily have to give away all our possessions. If we have them and we can help others with them, we should. But if we do not have them, then the intention is what counts. And then next we come to ethical discipline. That's verse number 26. If lacking discipline, you cannot accomplish even your own purpose. Wishing to achieve the purpose of others is truly absurd. Therefore, protect your own discipline without regard for worldly existence. This is the way of a bodhisattva. Ethical discipline is the intention of holding ethical discipline. It should not be where you think that I am going to keep discipline in order to attain the happiness of the higher realms or a birth in like the happier states of existence of gods and humans and so on, but rather I want to think I'm going to keep to ethical discipline in order to establish all others in the state of enlightenment. So with the mind of bodhicitta. So this is the practice of the bodhisattvas. And then in the letter to a friend, Nagarjuna says that ethical discipline is like a field, a ground, a field. And the arising of good qualities depends on whether or not one has such a supporting field, whether or not one has ethical discipline. And so, as the end quote, if one possesses ethical discipline, then the qualities of listening, pondering, and meditating will naturally arise. If one lacks ethical discipline, one doesn't have this foundation, this ground. Without a ground, you can't live anywhere. You can't build a house, for example, or in from a better perspective, you can't build a temple. From a worse perspective, you can't build a garbage can. But anyways, in order to build anything, you need the ground, the field of ethical discipline. So that's why it is very important. And then Karapa said that ethical discipline is the cause of attaining a precious human body with freedoms and fortunes. And now, once having found such a body, you should keep to ethical discipline without any flaws. And the nature, the essence of ethical discipline is that if one possesses it, one's mind becomes peaceful. And ethical discipline is when you practice ethical discipline, when you abandon the wish to harm others. And the root of ethical discipline is to have a mind of commitment, a committed mind that thinks I'm going to keep this vow or this ethical discipline. Whether it is when you receive an empowerment or you listen to a teaching, you have a sense of commitment, thinking, for example, I will not kill, I will not steal, I will not drink alcohol, and so on. So the root of ethical discipline is a committed mind. And so that's why we must reflect upon the faults, the shortcomings of not cultivating ethical discipline and the benefits of cultivating ethical discipline. And if one does not sustain ethical discipline, then it will be difficult to find a precious human body. And so we should just try our best, the best we can, to cultivate ethical discipline. And so even if like today you are not able to keep your discipline, you should think that tomorrow I'm going to keep my discipline. So we should do the best we can to keep our discipline. And so Milarepa also said that if one does not give up lying and deceiving, and then even if one speaks of I hold ethical discipline, I have vows, it is meaningless. So then next third we come to the paramita of patience. That's verse number 27. For bodhisattvas who desire a wealth of virtue, those who do harm are like a precious treasure. Therefore, without hostility, be patient with everyone. This is the way of a bodhisattva. And so then for the meaning of this verse, it says in the commentary that the most supreme, the best austerity practice is the practice of patience. And those bodhisattvas who desire a wealth of virtue, who desire great virtue, to them all suffering and enemies and harm doers and so forth actually become like a treasure, like a wish-fulfilling jewel that is very difficult to find. Or it is just like a jewel that is revealed in the house, in the home of a beggar who never knew he had such a wish-fulfilling jewel. So it is a wish-fulfilling jewel, and so for this reason, it is the bodhisattva's practice to abandon even the slightest animosity or anger towards all harm doers, and instead they practice the three kinds of patience. So this is the perfection of patience of the bodhisattvas. So then it says, so for these different kinds of patience, and so first, regardless of what harm arises, what harm doer one encounters, the one who practices patience, their mind will not be disturbed, and they will take no offense from that harm doer, and practice patience. So that's one. And then secondly, when they encounter suffering, their minds will not be disturbed, and they will not lose courage in their mind, and will endure it patiently. So that is the patience that accepts suffering. And then thirdly, so having found certainty in the qualities of the three jewels, and in the meaning of selflessness in an authentic way, there is nothing that disagrees with them in their mind, and so that is the patience of having gained a certainty in phenomena. So it says that when one practices patience, one must not lose heart in the face of difficulties and suffering. So that is whether one encounters these difficulties in the Dharma or in a mundane sense. So since we are Dharma practitioners, when we practice the Dharma, we may encounter all kinds of difficulties. For example, different conditions for practice do not come together, and so on. All kinds of difficulties may arise in our Dharma practice. And Dharma practice is something that needs to be done over a long period of time. And so during our Dharma practice, therefore, it isn't necessary to practice patience. And then there's also a kind of patience where when one realizes the actual qualities of the three jewels, and in particular the view of emptiness, and along with that also may arise a sense of fear. So then one also perseveres through that fear with patience. So we don't really need to be too much afraid of emptiness at this point, because even if we hear about emptiness, if someone explains to us emptiness, we don't really understand it anyways. No matter how much someone tells us about emptiness, we still cling to the true existence of things. We still grasp. But then there are some who do develop at a certain level of practice of fear emptiness, when suddenly everything becomes empty, then it is thought that a fear may arise. And so then in that case, the past lamas and so on, the great lamas have taught that one must practice patience in the face of the fear arising in terms of emptiness. So then it says in the commentary that so as it was explained in the root verse. So mainly when directly faced with harm doers, one should not get angry, and moreover, one should regard this harm doer with great joy, as though one had found a precious treasure. And then it says in the Bodhicharya Vadhara, so then one should without harming others in return, without retaliating, one actually, and without growing weary, growing or tired or exhausted mentally of them, one should actually regard them as a precious treasure that has been hidden in a home and is now revealed to one. It is said that the supreme patience is to take the lower seat. Now, if it is also said that there is no greater austerity than the practice of patience, and no greater evil or harm than cultivating hatred. And also it is said that the virtues accumulated in 1,000 aeons is destroyed by a single moment of hatred. So in the face of any kind of difficulty, any kind of hardship, heat and cold and so on, whether it is in the Dharma or in a mundane sense, if one is not able to practice patience at these times, then there's nothing in the world or in the Dharma that one will accomplish. So then the meaning of this verse is that even solitary realizers and hearers, they who only strive to achieve the happiness of gods and humans, even they strive with diligence, as though trying to put out a fire that when they find their heads are being on fire. So if even they can practice with diligence like that, then especially we who actually wish to bring all sentient beings to the state of enlightenment, it goes without saying that of course we will have to practice with great diligence. And Guru Rinpoche said that in order to practice the Vajrayana, one must possess faith, diligence, and wisdom. If one lacks diligence, one cannot accomplish the Dharma. Obviously, if one is lazy and not diligent, one cannot accomplish anything, whether it is in the world or in the Dharma. And if one is very diligent, even if one doesn't have that much wisdom, one still will accomplish any activity, and one will achieve the results, the fruition. Then the essence, the nature of diligence is a delight, a joy in the practice of virtue. And if one practices with joy diligently, then the fruition of any activity can become manifest. Then the second kind of diligence is when one applies oneself with great effort, with great diligence in any virtuous practice, such as any of the 6 paramitas, and that is called the diligence that gathers virtuous phenomena. And then the third kind of diligence is to apply oneself in the benefit of sentient beings flawlessly and perfectly. And so this exertion is called the diligence of acting for the benefit of sentient beings. The opposite of diligence is laziness. The opposite of laziness is diligence. If one lacks diligence, then, as you mentioned before, nothing in the world or in the Dharma can be accomplished. And so for the essence of diligence, again, the Bodhisattva Ngulcho says that the nature of laziness is an inability to accomplish the twofold purpose. So therefore, abandon such activity of laziness and apply yourself in virtue. So then it also says in a commentary that when one wishes to accomplish the dual benefit and happiness of others and oneself, then one applies oneself in all dharmas with great diligence and unwaveringly at all times. At all times, one should cherish diligence even greater, or as much as one would cherish or protect one's own life. Then fifth is the paramita of meditation. It says in verse number 29, disturbing emotions are destroyed by insight grounded in calm abiding. Knowing this, cultivate meditative concentration that purely transcends the four formless absorptions. This is the way of a bodhisattva. So then for the meaning of this verse, it says in the commentary that first, when one abides single-pointedly in a state of calm, that is calm abiding. And calm abiding is the root or the foundation of realizing emptiness. So in other words, one realizes insight, special insight, vipassana, on the basis of shamatha or calm abiding. And however, through calm abiding alone, one cannot attain enlightenment. Through calm abiding alone, one will take birth in the in the form and in the different formless realms. And in order not to be born there, one needs to cultivate together with shamatha, vipassana, the special insight and compassion. And so in this way, then gradually one should train in the three kinds of meditative concentration until one realizes the view of special insight or vipassana. So this is what is meant with shamatha, that is like an insight that is grounded in calm abiding. So it is through this insight or vipassana grounded in calm abiding that one attains the state of omniscience. And then for the nature of calm abiding, Gautama Rinpoche always tells us that calm abiding is when the thoughts of attachment, aversion, and ignorance have become pacified and the mind abides single-pointedly. So when the mind becomes disturbed, we cannot cultivate a state of calm abiding of shamatha. So that is when the mind is disturbed by attachment, anger, and ignorance. And so therefore we isolate ourselves from these disturbances, from all kinds of distractions and various disturbances, and go to a peaceful place. And in such a place of isolation, the state of calm abiding can actually be accomplished quite easily. And so that is why in order to cultivate calm abiding, we do isolate ourselves to places of seclusion. It says then in the Bodhicharyavatara that so a person whose mind is distracted, when a person's mind is distracted, the afflictive emotions always kind of linger like with you, with like your shoulder. So your shoulder is always there. So you never go somewhere without your shoulder. So the afflictions are like with you, like your shoulder is with you. In other words, they're always kind of ready to cause harm. So then again, in the letter to a friend, Nagarjuna says, without one who lacks meditative concentration will also have no wisdom. If one lacks meditative concentration, the vipassana, or the special insight that realizes selflessness, will not arise. And when that does not arise, it is said that the 3 levels of enlightenment will also not arise. So first we have to cultivate shamatha, and then based on shamatha arises vipassana. And based on vipassana arises the realization of emptiness. And so therefore, if we do not first cultivate shamatha, calm abiding, we cannot realize emptiness. We cannot really accomplish a deity or accomplish a vipassana, especially insight. So that's why shamatha is very important. But then again, if one only cultivates shamatha, and then one cultivates an attachment towards shamatha, and one continues to just rest within a state free from afflictions and concepts, only through that alone one can also not attain enlightenment. And if as a result of only having practiced shamatha, one will only be born in the 4 formless absorptions and so forth. So therefore one must cultivate a state of shamatha without any attachment to that state of shamatha, and through that one must ultimately see vipassana, the insight of emptiness. And also now if one wants to accomplish a deity, one cannot accomplish a deity without having shamatha as a basis. And Khenpo Munsal actually said that even if your shamatha is really excellent, through shamatha, through calm abiding alone, one cannot entirely uproot the afflictive emotions, because one encounters all kinds of situations that trigger one's anger or one's pride and so on, and then we are unable to stop them or to become liberated from them. So if one only cultivates a state of shamatha, it is a very blissful state. But then when one again engages in the day-to-day activities, one encounters all kinds of conditions, such as being praised or being blamed or being humiliated, or one develops pride or jealousy and so forth. And then one is unable to counter these afflictions only through having practiced shamatha beforehand. So in order to actually really uproot or entirely liberate the afflictive emotions, we need to develop vipassana, or especially insight. And so then the Bodhisattva Ngulchotome then says that without meditative concentration, one will not see dharmata or reality itself. So therefore, meditate on, cultivate the samadhi that is free of all concepts, all conceptual structures. And all appearances are one's own mind, and mind itself is primordially free from all extremes of elaboration. Whoever so So therefore, the essence of meditative concentration is to not grasp at a subject-object duality, but to remain without distraction, single-pointedly. So that is authentic meditative concentration. And so then there are many different ways of practicing shamatha. So one may begin with using a focal object, like an image, like a Buddha image, for example, or one can also observe the natural flow of one's breath, and in this way practice calm abiding, or one can meditate on a seed syllable, or there is a shamatha called the mindfulness of feelings, or the mindfulness of the body, and so forth. There are many different ways of practicing shamatha, and so in this way one should train in shamatha. So as Gachin Rinpoche says, that the essence of shamatha mainly is that the afflictive emotions of attachment, anger, and ignorance come down, and one abides single-pointedly. So that's shamatha, calm abiding. So then next, number 6, we come to the perfection of wisdom, and that's verse number 30. It says, without wisdom, one cannot reach complete enlightenment through the other 5 perfections. Thus, combined with skillful means, cultivate wisdom that does not discriminate among the 3 spheres. This is the way of a bodhisattva. So for the meaning of this verse, in the summarize it in the commentary, says that so if one lacks the skillful means of compassion and the wisdom of emptiness, then even though one may practice the other 5 perfections, they will not lead to the state of enlightenment without compassion and wisdom. So in order to realize emptiness, we first need to accumulate a great amount of merit. And then through the accumulation of merit, we can purify the obscurations of the afflictive emotions and the subtle obscurations to omniscience. And then once these are purified, actually it is then quite easy to realize emptiness. Easy and unmistakably, one will then realize emptiness. And then it says that if one lacks wisdom, then no qualities at all whatsoever can be accomplished in general. And then in particular, if one lacks the wisdom that realizes selflessness, then the other 5 perfections, such as generosity and so forth, are not sufficient. It is just like without wisdom, one is without eyes, without eyesight. And then it says in the condensed Prajna Paramita, the perfection of wisdom, it says that if one does not have wisdom, it is like having no eyes. And then without eyes, even if you have the other 5 perfections, you are like blind without having a guide, and therefore cannot come close to the state of enlightenment. So therefore, wisdom is like possessing eyesight. It is said in the Heart Sutra that the perfection of wisdom is inexpressible, being beyond words and being beyond thoughts. I pay homage to the perfection of wisdom, that is the sphere or domain of self-knowing primordial awareness. So once one has purified all the obscurations, the 2 kinds of obscurations, and then Lama endowed with blessings and a disciple, a qualified disciple, and come together. As a result of that, one realizes the perfection of wisdom. Also, Milarepa had said that aside from exposing the falsehood of afflictive emotions, there is no other perfection of primordial wisdom than that. And so exposing the falsehood of the afflictive emotions means that when any of the afflictions like attachment, anger, or ignorance arise, you recognize them. You recognize, oh, this is pride, or this is, now I'm angry. And this awareness, this recognition itself is actually wisdom. And so it is this seeing, this knowing. And then knowing and seeing that, one will not become controlled by the afflictions such as desire or anger and so on. So they become liberated, and then they need to become liberated. So for example, if you get angry, then you recognize the anger, and if you do not become controlled by the anger, if it doesn't steer your mind, you will not accumulate karma. And if there's no karma, then there will also be no result, and then the mind has become liberated. And so it's not enough to liberate an afflictive emotion just once, but they always need to become liberated. And that is why it is essential to always sustain mindfulness and awareness. So a clear awareness that always recognizes the afflictions, so that awareness is always in control and the mind does not become controlled by the afflictive emotions. So then Longchen Ramcham had said that there is no higher learning than to realize the nature of your mind. So all the different things that we train our mind in, the different practices that we do, are all in order to realize the nature of the mind. So that therefore there is no higher learning than to realize the nature of the mind. And then Jamgyung Kongtrul also said that I have not recognized my own thoughts to be the Dharmakaya. I'm unable to sustain the uncontrived natural state. I do not trust in the natural self-settled state. And so that's the end of the quote. So when we are free of all mental elaborations, then we attain the perfection of wisdom. But we don't attain the perfection of wisdom because we don't often trust in it. And we're not mentally present. So, for example, if you're reciting the Mani mantra, it is actually really excellent to have an awareness of knowing that I am reciting the Mani mantra, because we do all kinds of recitations, we make all kinds of prayers with our mouth, but then if the mind is distracted outside, we don't really know what we're actually saying, leave alone really practicing the deity. We don't even know what we're actually reciting here. And even if we do know it, even if there is some flashes of awareness, we become obscured again very quickly. And so it is said that actually it's quite easy to see the nature of the mind, but it's very difficult to sustain the nature of the mind. And it is that the way it should be sustained, in the practice of Dzogchen or Mahamudra, is just like an ever-flowing river. A river never stops flowing; it continuously flows. And so, similarly, we must sustain a continuous, ongoing state of meditation. So the root of this is that we must sustain mindfulness and heedfulness, always being on a watch out for the thief, which are the thoughts in our mind. For example, if there's a house and somebody lives in that house, and then a person has like a big jewel or a lot of money in that house, and he will stay in that house and guard that money. And so the fact that a person stays in the house is mindfulness. So even if a thief comes to the door and wants to enter the house, once the thief realizes that there is someone staying in the house, the thief will likely not enter the house but leave again. But of course, if there's no one in the house, then the thief will enter the house and take all the money. So the person staying in the house is like possessing mindfulness. If you always sustain mindfulness, then you protect your mind from the afflictive emotions, so they won't arise. And if you lack mindfulness, then whatever other virtue you practice, you are still very far away from enlightenment. So this was taught by Patrul Rinpoche. So whatever Dharma practice we engage in, is mindfulness and so heedfulness are really essential. And whether we are practicing Mahamudra or Dzogchen, whatever you practice, the point is to liberate your afflictive emotions. And so once they're liberated, then that is all you need to do. So the point is not to become controlled by the afflictive emotions. If, on the other hand, you're unable to liberate the afflictive emotions, you may call yourself a Mahamudra or a Dzogchen practitioner, but these words are just empty. They have no benefit at all. So I, for example, when I get angry, I recognize that I'm angry, but then immediately I forget about it. I forget about the fact that I actually need to practice patience. So it happens when your mindfulness is not very stable. You might recognize that you're angry or that you're jealous, but then you still become controlled by these afflictions. And then just the recognition alone is of not much benefit. Patrul Rinpoche had said that if you're not able to oppose the afflictive emotion, then you might as well just forget about your meditation, just like throw it away. Meaning that if you're unable to decrease your afflictive emotions through your practice, you are not really practicing, you're not really meditating, and then the meditation is really useless. In other words, if you have no mindfulness and awareness, even if you know a lot of Dharma, it is of no benefit. So that's the perfection of wisdom. Tilopa said to Naropa just before he hit him over the head with his sandal, he said that it's nothing that I can show you, nothing that I can give you. You have to see it for yourself. You have to understand it yourself. And so then he hit him on the head with the sandal. So similarly, also today, this is nothing, perfection of wisdom is nothing that I can just show you. And not even another Lama and a high, great Lama can't really show that to you. But it's something that you have to realize through your own diligence and your own insight. So I might not have explained this so well, so I'm sorry for that. But anyways, these are the 6 paramitas. And so next, then, are the 4 dharmas as taught in the sutras. And so these are first to examine one's own faults and abandoning them, one's own confusions and abandoning them, then abandoning to speak about the faults of bodhisattvas, then abandoning attachment to the households of benefactors, and then 4th, abandoning harsh speech. So the first one is then verse number 31. Unless you examine your own confusion, you might look like a practitioner, but not act like one. Therefore, always examine yourself and abandon confusion. This is the way of the Bodhisattva. So then in the commentary, it explains this verse. It says, a person who has entered the path of the Mahayana, if such a person who has entered the path of the Mahayana does not examine at all times one's own faults and confusions, even if that person, so that this person will then, this person's qualities, this is, their honorability, their qualities will become completely exhausted. let's see. So even though one's own faults may be as large as a mountain, one still may think of oneself as a great Dharma practitioner. And then one sees other people as just ordinary people, and thinks one is superior to them. So even though one is not a true Dharma practitioner, one becomes like an imposter, kind of posing as a Dharma practitioner when one actually is not a real Dharma practitioner. And so then it is possible that even though one acts as a Dharma practitioner, one actually still engages in activities of taming one's enemies and supporting one's friends without ever examining one's own flaws. So this is a grave mistake. And so for this reason, it is the Bodhisattva's practice to examine their faults of the three doors continuously at all times. And having seen their own faults, they abandon their own faults.
Okay, then the chapter nata. Junjugle sondo. Kansen then Jesse G. Dag Jungla Takbarchi. Shibata Ranjunla Tojin. Jube Gone. Then Yinjung Jung Pama the Karchio also. Yinjung Jung Juba. Yinjung Jung Jupama the Karchio. Not Marpochi.
Mabodera.
Not Junjugle. Was Chaptanando.
Yeah. So then it says in the Bodhicharya Vatara, at all times and in whatever one does, one should examine one's own faults. And having examined and clearly seen one's own faults, it is important to abandon these faults. And in particular, someone who has entered the great vehicle, the Mahayana vehicle, I'm sorry, didn't read that yet until here. So then that verse continues, and so then in particular for someone who has entered the path of the Mahayana, one who has entered the Mahayana path should not look at other people's faults or express their faults, but rather should examine their own confusions, their own faults, and abandon them. So in fact, if one expresses and if one looks at and expresses the faults of others, that actually is in contradiction to the Mahayana. Then Chamgyal Kongtrul Rinpoche had said, even though one's own faults are as large as we are hiding our own faults that are as large as a mountain, but we are exposing and speaking of the slightest faults in others. Guru, please quickly regard me with compassion and grant me your blessings for me to see my own faults. So then next is verse number 32. If driven by disturbing emotions, you speak about the faults of other bodhisattvas, you are actually diminishing yourself. So don't mention the faults of those who have entered the great vehicle. This is the way of a bodhisattva. So in a way, we actually have already discussed this verse. So actually, the meaning of this and the previous verse are quite similar. So the previous verse speaks about looking at one's own faults, examining one's own faults. Now this verse speaks about, that is now, verse number 32, speaks about not looking at the faults of others. And so in the commentary it says, for the meaning of this verse, so a person who has entered the Mahayana if such a person who has entered the Mahayana expresses the faults of another bodhisattva or other being with an afflicted mind in general and a jealous mind in particular, then this person defiles, pollutes oneself with downfalls, with faults and downfalls. And in this way, they actually deviate from the Mahayana path. So in general, therefore, in general, one should not speak about even the slightest fault of a sentient being, and in particular of someone else who has already entered the Mahayana. So a bodhisattva restrains themselves from ever expressing even the slightest fault of anyone. And so, this is the practice of the bodhisattvas.
Oh, okay, that's a break again. Tea break. 25 minutes. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So then, coming back to the commentary, it says that if out of jealousy one belittles, looks down on the Dharma or another person, one's own virtue will decline, and others' minds will become disturbed. And so, therefore, one should only have thoughts of wishing to benefit others, and should never express the faults of others.
Okay, then that's about the last. In Gurwan, the Pinsum Sujas, and to some going to Sawan, and the Pensaki Chimpa Jinda China, Japapon, Jasela, and
Then next is verse number 33. It says, concern for wealth and respect leads to conflict and to the loss of learning, reflecting, and meditating. So abandon attachment to your circle of friends, relations, and benefactors. This is the way of a bodhisattva. And then for the meaning of this verse, it says in the commentary that then if out of attachment to benefactors and relations of friends and so on, and those who regard one and venerate one or honor one, is out of attachment to such like veneration from benefactors and so forth, a person who has entered into the Mahayana path then engages in conflict and quarreling, in terms of like competing for benefactors and so forth, then their own activities, their practices of listening, reflecting, and meditating, the holy Dharma activities all will decline. And so for this reason, it is the Bodhisattva's practice to abandon attachment to the households of friends, relations, and benefactors. And so it says in the commentary then also that so due to being honored and respected by benefactors and so forth, one develops an attachment to such a veneration. And so that increases the thoughts of attachment, anger, and ignorance. And so then in order to gain wealth or benefactors and so on, one may then quarrel and express the faults of others and so on. In order to gain the benefactors or their money and so on. So a lot of faults come from such attachment to the benefactors, and therefore one must be very careful. Then verse number 34 says, Harsh words disturb others' minds and corrupt your bodhisattva conduct. Therefore, abandon harsh speech, which is unpleasant to others. This is the way of a bodhisattva. So, as a follower of the bodhisattvas, it is important that one, when one speaks, in a gentle and a pleasant way, and does never make use of harsh or unkind words. So then it says, in order to benefit all sentient beings, the bodhisattvas, when first speaking to them, use gentle words. And then it says in the letter to a friend, Nagarjuna says, one should speak in a pleasant way, in a way that delights the Buddhas. A person who speaks in a corrupt way uses words like filthy words. So there are 3 examples. One is like honey, one is like a flower, and one is like filth. So it says that one should speak like honey and like a flower, but one should not speak like filth. So there are 3 ways of speaking. First, there's a way of speaking in a pleasing, in a way that engenders joy, which is sweet like honey. And the second one is pleasant like a beautiful flower. And the third way is to speak in a degrading way like filth. And so of these 3, the first 2 need to be adopted, and the last one need to be abandoned. One master says one should abandon, a wise person should abandon into a far distance words that cause discontent, like displeasure in the minds of others.
Okay. The karape tiktum data ma pimpa jungi shedang pongche. So. Ranju ngimba. Ranju ngimba shedang. Pango yoris. Ni shedang in the singi shondo yoro.
So then Karapa says, do not shoot the poisonous arrow of harsh words, but abandon a negative state of mind of hatred. It is said that even though words are no actual weapon, when one speaks harsh words, it can create many wounds in somebody else's heart. So harsh words, unkind words disturb others' minds, like threatening to kill someone and so forth. Actually, these words are empty, but if we cling to their reality, then we develop thoughts of attachment, anger, and ignorance, and accumulate a lot of karma. So in the practice of the deity and the mantra recitation, we always say that sounds should be heard as an echo or illusory by nature. And then the Bodhisattva Ngulchotome says, if one speaks too much, it is possible that much non-virtue arises. And then next it says, third, the training of abandoning the afflictive emotions. It's verse number 35. When disturbing emotions become habitual, it is difficult to reverse them with antidotes. Therefore, the master of mindfulness wields antidotes as weapons and destroys disturbing emotions, such as attachment, the moment they start to arise. This is the way of a bodhisattva. So then in the commentary, it explains this verse. So it says, whatever afflictive emotion, such as attachment or desire, arises, if one does not oppose the affliction, instantly as it arises, immediately, with an antidote, then one will gradually habituate to this emotion, and then it arises naturally. And later, it will be very difficult to turn this affliction away, even when one applies an antidote. And so, therefore, the person with great mindfulness, like a master of great mindfulness, will at all times be mindful of one's three doors, and being mindful of what to do and what not to do. And with such mindfulness, so they wield the weapon of the antidotes with such mindfulness, so that the moment an afflictive emotion such as desire arises, they are ready to cast that weapon of the antidote and abandon the afflictive emotions the moment they arise. So this is the way in which bodhisattvas abandon rely on antidotes to abandon the afflictive emotions. So one must destroy the afflictive emotion the moment it arises with mindfulness. The afflictive emotion is like a thief, and then mindfulness is like a powerful person with a weapon. And the moment they see the thief, they will instantly cut their head off. So then the thief can't steal anything. So in the same way, one must stop the afflictions the very moment they arise. Because if one doesn't stop them the moment they arise, one will become controlled by them, and then one will form a very strong habitual tendencies, and then later it will not be easy to stop the afflictive emotions. So then it says in the commentary that so with mindfulness, one must instantly sever the head of the afflictive emotions. So one must sever them the moment they arise, just like catching a thief or like an enemy, by applying the antidote, which is like throwing like a spear, or like a lance, a spear at that enemy, and annihilate them that way. Because otherwise, if we fail to do so, then we allow them to remain, then the affliction will only grow stronger and stronger. And the stronger it grows, the more difficult it will become to abandon then the afflictive emotion later on. And so it says in a commentary that the way to face this enemy of the afflictive emotion and to oppose this enemy is explained extensively in the chapter on diligence in the Bodhicharyavatara. And so since beginningless time, we have habituated to the afflictive emotions. And so that is why they now arise naturally and very, very powerfully. For example, even just in this lifetime, if we become addicted to like smoking or drinking alcohol, then even in this life, it's already very difficult to abandon that, to give that up. But this grasping at self and other and so on is something that we have habituated to since beginningless times. So that's why it's very difficult to abandon this. It's not easy to even recognize this. So therefore, it is important to cultivate mindfulness and then gradually abandon them. So this method of subduing and purifying the thoughts pertaining to the three times in the post-meditative state should be practiced until all appearances and all thoughts arise as the Dharmakaya. And so until this is accomplished, until this is achieved, to sustain mindfulness is indispensable.
And
so, and until then, one must not allow the mind to become controlled by confused thoughts. And so then it says, first, first one must recognize the afflictive emotions as they arise. Then, in the middle, one must give rise to the power of the antidote and abandon them. And then in the end, one must apply oneself with effort to not allow them to arise again. And then it says number 4 is the training in mindfulness for the sake of others. And that is verse number 36. In brief, wherever you are and whatever you do, always examine the state of your mind. Act to accomplish the purpose of others through constant mindfulness and awareness. This is the way of a bodhisattva. So in brief, this verse really encapsulates the essence of the 37 practices. Then in the commentary, it explains this verse. So it says, and this verse constitutes the summary or the essence of all the previous verses of the Bodhisattva's practices. And the essence of all these practices is that wherever you are and whichever of the 4 activities you engage in at all times, look at the state of your mind. Is it in a virtuous or a non-virtuous state? And in this way, sustaining mindfulness constantly and continuously, you do not lose your alertness. And with such alertness, a bodhisattva engages in altruistic activities that benefit others. So it is therefore the bodhisattva's practice with such mindfulness to accomplish the twofold purpose and accomplishing the purpose of others at all times continuously. So this is the very root of utmost importance, the root of all the bodhisattva practices. So then it says in the Bodhicharyavatara, if one wishes to observe all trainings, then one must apply oneself with focus and protect one's own mind. And then also it says that so in terms of the trainings here, and the trainings here refers to the 3 trainings of ethical discipline, samadhi, and wisdom. And so then it says, the method to protect, to keep to all these trainings is to always protect your own mind. So if you protect your own mind, again, it says in the Bodhicharyavatara, those who wish to protect their own mind will sustain mindfulness and introspection or alertness, and make effort in these at all times, and in this way protect their own minds. And so I fold my hands, or I pay great respect to one who practices in this way. And so then it says, so as a method to, as a way to protect your own mind, it is of utmost importance to rely on mindfulness. It also says in the Bodhicharyavatara that if one is able to protect one's own mind, then there is no need for any other practices of austerity, any other exercises, like physical exercises. Even if one engages in many physical exercises but doesn't protect one's mind, they are also of no benefit. But if one is able to protect one's own mind, then there is no need for various yogic exercises and so forth. Also in the Bodhicharya Avatara, it says if you bind the mind with the rope of mindfulness, then all fears will disappear. So the unmindful mind is like a mad elephant. But if you tie it down with shackles, then the elephant can't go anywhere. So then if you tie the mind down with the rope of mindfulness, then all fears will disappear. And so then it says, whatever practice of the sutras or the tantras one engages in, and they all rely on mindfulness. And Patrul Rinpoche said that if one lacks mindfulness, or if one does not sustain the view of Mahamudra, then even though one may engage in many Dharma practices, such as different recitations or the generation stage, one will still not realize the meaning of Mahamudra. And one, therefore, one just basically dwells in this kind of blank state that of having an indifferent state of having no thoughts at all, and in that way one is very distant from the state of enlightenment. Then next is number 5, the dedication for of all virtues for complete enlightenment, and that's verse number 37. With the wisdom of threefold purity, dedicate to enlightenment all the merit gained from having made such effort. Dedicate it to dispel the suffering of limitless beings. This is the way of a bodhisattva. And then, so for the meaning of this verse, it says in the commentary, so the bodhisattvas have who have applied themselves in the practices of all the previous verses, the previous practices, with great joy and delight and great diligence. Then, having engaged in such practice, the virtue created through such practice then is dedicated for the sake of others, and so that virtue is dedicated as well as all the virtue accumulated by self and others throughout the 3 times. So all virtue without exception is brought together and dedicated in order to clear away the suffering of all sentient beings. And it is dedicated in such a way that the dedication is free from the 3 spheres of a dedicator, a dedication, and the recipient of the dedication. So completely free of the stains of grasping at any reality. The virtues are therefore dedicated from within a state of wisdom that realizes the lack of any true existence, and is dedicated for the sake of the enlightenment, the complete enlightenment of all other sentient beings. So this is how the bodhisattvas practice dedication in order to increase virtue. And then it says in the sutras that all phenomena depend on on conditions, and this condition has its root in one's motivation, and therefore whatever aspiration prayer is made, a corresponding result will come to fruition. It is said that if one fails to dedicate one's virtues, then the virtues accumulated in 1,000 aeons is destroyed by a single moment of anger. And we generally speak about 4 causes that destroy our virtues. For example, it is failing to dedicate, or it is to perform a corrupt dedication, and so forth. So, but if we dedicate the virtues for the sake of all sentient beings, then these virtues will never be exhausted until enlightenment. And then in the end, it says, following the teachings of the holy ones and the meaning of the sutras, tantras, and their commentaries, I have written these 37 verses on the ways of bodhisattvas for those who wish to train on the bodhisattva's path. So in the end, and Tome says that so having consulted all the different scripture collections on the practices of the bodhisattvas and the words of the Buddha, the sutras, and the treatises, the commentaries on these words, and in particular, having followed the words of the past Kadampa masters and also his own gurus, the words of his own gurus, he wrote down the practices of the bodhisattvas in 37 verses. Yeah, and he said that I wrote down these verses on how to train like the bodhisattvas for all those fortunate ones who wish to train in the ways of bodhisattvas. Then it says, because my intellect is feeble and my learning is poor, this composition will not be admired by scholars. Yet, since I have relied upon the sutras and the teachings of the holy ones, I believe these bodhisattva practices are not mistaken. And so in the end, then Mulcho Tome, the author of this text, says that even though I myself have a poor, a feeble intellect, and my learning and wisdom are very small, even though I do not possess such intelligence or wisdom, and these because I don't possess this intelligence and wisdom, the words I wrote might not be pleasing to the ears from great scholars. They're not written in a very eloquent or poetic way. However, these words are not a self-fabrication, so they're not a pretense or like a personal fabrication, but whatever has been stated is all written on the basis of the sutras and the words of the holy ones. And so for this reason, he says, I believe that these verses on the way of the bodhisattvas are authentic and without confusion, or are without mistakes and without confusion. And then the third concluding verse says, however, since the vast deeds of bodhisattvas are difficult to fathom for simple-minded beings like myself, I beg the forgiveness of the holy ones for the mass of my errors, such as contradictions and inconsistencies. Then in the commentary, it says, so however, the bodhisattva practices that I explained before, although they are without confusion, without mistake, still these practices of the bodhisattvas are extremely vast and profound, as vast as an ocean, and therefore are very difficult to fathom for one of inferior intellect like myself. And so for this reason, he says, I confess all contradictions and inconsistencies that may have occurred in this composition and to the holy ones, to the sublime ones. So he offers a confession in the end. And then the last verse says, by the virtue arising from this, may all sentient beings become, through relative and ultimate sublime bodhicitta, like the protector Chenrezig, who does not abide in the extremes of existence or peace. And so then for the meaning of this verse, it says in the commentary, if there has been any virtue, any merit from having explained these 37 verses of the Bodhisattva's ways, and then may it serve as the cause for all sentient beings to cultivate the wisdom of the ultimate bodhicitta, the wisdom that realizes the ultimate truth of emptiness. And may it become a cause for them cultivating the relative bodhicitta of great compassion and altruism that wishes all sentient beings to attain enlightenment. And so may all sentient beings cultivate the ultimate bodhicitta and the relative bodhicitta, and thereby may they all attain the state of enlightenment. And then if there are some beings left behind who have not become liberated, may they not be left behind, but may I continue to engage in their benefit, just like Chenrezig, and accomplish the purpose of countless sentient beings. So maybe I wasn't able to explain this so well, but fortunately we had a good translator who was able to translate the root verses of this commentary, and I believe without mistake. And I just added to it to complement the commentary to the best of my abilities. I'm not sure how that turned out, but anyways, this is the end of the teachings of the 37 practices. Perhaps it was of some benefit to you, or perhaps it was just some time passing. But anyways, what we should take from it is it's important to sustain mindfulness and heedfulness all the time. And really keep in mind the last verse in particular, the verse number 36 in particular, that says, in whatever you do, always look at the state of your mind. So it would be good to always keep this in mind. So I don't know how to speak about this any further. So I will stop the teachings here, and we will end with Chigten Sumgen's dedication and long life prayers.
Okay, Cindy, can you read? Page number 18. 1-8.
Glorious, holy, venerable, precious, kind root and lineage gurus, divine assembly of yidams, assemblies of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, heroes and heroines, Yogini and her assembly of Dakinis, all of you dwelling in the 10 directions, please heed me. By the power of this vast root of virtue, may I benefit all beings through my body, speech, and mind. May the afflictions of attachment, hatred, ignorance, pride, and jealousy not arise in my mind. May thoughts of fame, reputation, gain, respect, honor, and concern for this life not arise for even a moment. May my mind stream be moistened by loving kindness, compassion, and bodhicitta, and may I become a spiritual master with good qualities equal to the infinity of space. May I gain the supreme attainment of Mahamudra in this very life. At the moment of death, may I not experience the suffering of being abruptly severed from this life. May I not suffer a terrible death. May I not die confused by wrong view. May I not experience an untimely death. May I die joyfully and happily in the great luminosity of the mind itself and in the crystal clarity of Dharmata. May I in any case gain the supreme attainment of Mahamudra at the time of death or in the bardo.
Jaga Joga Yanda Bagayana Aya Deva Doka Sosa Garja Reza Jadan Ganga Doja Jadan Garding Garja Gaza Gaja 28 Kibza Gunza Gunja Jaja Danda Nala Wanta Dragong Paraja Damba Senda Ba Yada Dazangon Danger Sadoin Gurloy Java Jabo Yendon Garba Zambe Saja Namka Dava Jabe Sawa Samba Dina Zela Zoa Yendu Mane The short prayer, Amitabha. Emma Gonzara Sanje Namandaya Da Yesu Jovo Doje Demoda Yanda Samba Deje Dona La Sanje Sanza Bame Koje Deje Gonza Bada Me Baye Deva Jinge Save Gengale Dayan Dana Sambe Jama Dajewa Ginja Parama Chuba Yere Jena Nanda Gandon Yo Daga Mola Dabaya Soja Sanja 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 Kemendaba Jinja Labdo Ya da panza ya awa bodana so English.
Oh, in the center is the wondrous Buddha of boundless light. To his right is Chenrezig, the Lord of great compassion. And to his left is Vajrapani, Bodhisattva of great might. They are surrounded by an inconceivable assembly of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. Immeasurable peace and happiness is a pure land of great bliss. When I and all beings pass from this life, may we be born in that land unhindered by another samsaric birth, and may we then behold the face of Amitabha, boundless light. May all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas of the 10 directions bless this aspiration that it may be accomplished without hindrance. Teata Pinsadriya Awa Bodhanaya So.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for Translator Susu and
Thank you.
Jack. Everybody, thank you and join with us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Abo Lama.
And we thanks Abo Lama gave wonderful teaching. And also we like to thank Ina's amazing translator and Jack's wonderful translator and Susu's wonderful translator. With all the translator, we don't understand the teaching, so translator is very important. Also like to thank all the volunteers. We also like to thank Sister Hui, gave us free lunch. Everybody is wonderful, great. So the teaching event is very successful. The next time is September 9th to 11th. We have a new name. So also we welcome everyone join us. Okay. Thank you, Abula. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome. Today we have the Practices of practice or not?
Today is Sunday. Sunday don't have, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
You know this, we have puja for somebody die, right?
Yes.
This today or?
Yes. We maybe after the teaching right now do the read the translation. Is that okay?
Yeah, sure.
Huh?
Yeah, sure, yes. Maybe
Yeah.
25 minutes later.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. 5:30. Please come join in the Red Genius practice, okay?
Yeah, after 25 minutes.
Okay, thank you so much. Yeah. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you everyone. Thank you, translator.
You
Thank
want to say?
Thank you.
Abo Lama, on behalf of the Drikung Seattle, we thank you for giving us this wonderful teaching, and we like to give you a little offering and gift. Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
Okay, thank you so kindness. Thank you so much. Yeah, bye-bye. Oh, please, no need. Please.
Okay. Place.
Yeah. Please, don't bring. Please, don't bring. Please.
No, Abo Lama. No, I'm serious. You work very hard. No, you deserve it.
No, very hard.
Yes.
Huh? Very easy.
Yes.
Abo Lama, Rajaman did a picture. Very nice.
Yes.
Look. Very nice picture. Very nice picture.
Serious.
No.
It's
That
okay.
is okay, but
Nice picture. Thank you for that good picture. Thank you.
Thank you, Abala, for wonderful teachings.